My name is Allison Matthews, and I'm 27 years old. I always believed family meant unconditional support, a safe harbor in life's storms. I was wrong. I was betrayed twice in one night, first by Rebecca's cutting words, then by my parents' deafening silence. That family dinner 6 months ago shattered the perfect image we'd maintained for years. Their silence during her attack cut deeper than any insult she hurled at me. It's strange how the things people don't say can hurt more than the things they do. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt the sting of someone's silence when you needed them most. Let's talk about how I finally learned that sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. Growing up in our white colonial house in suburban Boston, I believed we were the perfect American family. My father Robert, a successful investment banker, and my mother Alina, a part-time real estate agent who primarily dedicated herself to maintaining our family's flawless image, created a home where harmony was paramount. Conflict was the enemy. Any disagreement, any raised voice was quickly hushed, smoothed over, or redirected. Matthews don't make scenes, my mother would say with a tight smile whenever emotions threatened to boil over. My brother James and I were inseparable as children. 3 years older, he was my protector, my confidant, my built-in best friend. We built elaborate blanket forts in the basement, created secret languages only we understood, and pledged to always have each other's backs. Matthews stick together, we'd say, mimicking our parents' frequent refrain but adding our own meaning to it. Everything changed when James went to college. He attended Dartmouth, our father's alma mater, following the expected path toward business and finance. I still remember the day he called home during his sophomore year, his voice unusually animated as he told us about a girl he'd met in his economics class, Rebecca. Even her name sounded sophisticated. The first time James brought Rebecca home for Thanksgiving, I was a senior in high school. She arrived wearing a camel-colored cashmere sweater, pearl earrings, and a smile that dazzled everyone, especially my parents. Rebecca Anderson came from a family similar to ours, affluent, respected, appearance-conscious. She embodied everything my parents valued. "Allison, James has told me so much about you," Rebecca gushed, embracing me as though we were already sisters. "We're going to be such good friends, I just know it." I wanted to believe her. I really did. For a while, I even thought we were building a genuine relationship. Rebecca would text me occasionally with links to articles about graphic design when I mentioned my interest in pursuing it in college. She'd ask my opinion on gifts for James. She'd compliment my artwork when I showed her my portfolio. It wasn't until James and Rebecca had been dating for nearly 2 years that I began noticing the pattern. Rebecca's warmth was performative, swishing on in front of my parents, and James, swishing off when they weren't looking. The texts came only when she needed something. The compliments were followed by subtle suggestions about more practical career paths. "Graphic design is so competitive, Allison. Not everyone can be successful at it. It's good to have a backup plan, don't you think?" she said once while helping me with college applications, her tone dripping with sweet concern that felt anything but sincere. My parents adored Rebecca. She represented everything they hoped for in a daughter-in-law: polished, ambitious, socially connected. She played the part perfectly, bringing my mother expensive candles from boutiques in New York, discussing investment strategies with my father, always knowing exactly the right thing to say to remain firmly on their pedestal. Meanwhile, I chose to attend Massachusetts College of Art and Design instead of the business schools my parents subtly pushed. "Are you sure that's the best use of our tuition money?" my father had asked, his disappointment poorly concealed. My mother had simply sighed and said, "Well, I suppose you've always been our creative one," in a tone that made it clear this wasn't necessarily a compliment. James and Rebecca got engaged during their senior year of college. The wedding was lavish, featured in a regional lifestyle magazine, and I stood beside Rebecca as a bridesmaid in a dress she had chosen that somehow made only me look washed out among her friends. "The seafoam really brings out your unique coloring," she'd said with a smile that didn't reach her eye. After the wedding, family gatherings became increasingly tense. Rebecca established herself as the daughter my parents wished they had, successful in a prestigious marketing firm, impeccably dressed, always ready with the right anecdote for any social situation. James followed her lead, gradually adopting her perspectives, her judgments, her subtle dismissals of my choice. "So you're still doing that design thing?" Rebecca would ask at Christmas dinner, her eyebrows slightly raised. "That must be fulfilling for you. My mother would quickly change the subject to Rebecca's recent promotion or the couple's plans to buy a house in just the right neighborhood. My father would nod approvingly as James and Rebecca discussed their investment portfolio. I became increasingly peripheral to these conversations, despite physically sitting at the same table. My anxiety before family gatherings grew until I found myself sitting in my car outside my parents' house, giving myself pep talks just to walk through the door. "It's only a few hours," I'd whisper to myself. "You can do this." There were countless small moments that highlighted Rebecca's true nature. The time she accidentally spilled red wine on the portfolio I'd brought to show the family. The way she would talk over me whenever I began sharing any achievement. How she'd remind everyone of my childhood failures under the guise of remember when story. And through it all, my parents smiled politely, changed subjects when tensions rose, and pretended not to notice. James grew more distant, caught between his wife and his sister, ultimately choosing the path of least resistance. Peace at any price was the Matthews family motto, and I was learning that sometimes I was the price. After graduating with my BFA in graphic design, I entered the job market with high hopes and a portfolio I was proud of. Unfortunately, my timing couldn't have been worse. The economic downturn hit the creative industry particularly hard, and entry-level positions became scarce. For months, I sent applications into what felt like a void, occasionally landing interviews that ended with, "We'll keep your information on file." When my apartment lease ended, I faced a difficult decision. My savings had dwindled, and without steady income, renewing wasn't an option. Moving back to my parents' house at 25 felt like the ultimate failure, a confirmation of every doubt Rebecca had ever subtly planted about my career choice. "Of course you can stay here," my mother said when I called, her voice a mixture of concern and something else, satisfaction, perhaps. "It will be nice to have you home again." My childhood bedroom had been converted to a home office within months of my departure for college, so I moved into the guest room, a space that never felt like mine with its beige walls and generic hotel-like decor. I promised myself it would be temporary, just until I found my footing. Rebecca's reaction to my changed circumstances was predictably smug, though carefully disguised as sympathy. "Living at home again, that must be challenging," she said during a Sunday dinner, shortly after I'd moved back. "But I guess that's the reality of choosing a creative field. Not everyone can afford independence right away." She said this while twirling her fork in pasta, her diamond engagement ring catching the light, her business casual attire a reminder of her successful marketing career. James sat beside her, nodding slightly, as though her assessment of my situation was both accurate and kind. "It's temporary," I replied, forcing a smile. "The design industry is picking up again." Rebecca hummed, unconvinced. "Well, there's no shame in reconsidering your options. My firm is always looking for administrative assistants. It's not creative, but it's a foot in the door in a stable industry." My mother jumped in then, as she always did when conversations threatened to expose actual feelings. "Who would like dessert? I made your favorite apple crisp, James." The months at home grew increasingly difficult. Rebecca's digs about my career choices became more frequent and less disguised. At a family barbecue, she loudly discussed salary prospects for different majors within earshot of my parents' friends. During a holiday gathering, she gave me a self-help book titled Reinventing Your Career Path, with passages about accepting limitations already highlighted. James grew more distant, influenced by Rebecca's perspective that I was choosing my struggling career over family stability. When I confided in him about my job search frustrations, his responses became shorter, less supportive. "Maybe Rebecca has a point about looking into other fields," he suggested during one of our increasingly rare one-on-one conversations. "There's no shame in admitting something isn't working out." Then, after nearly 7 months of searching, I landed a junior design position at Blue Leaf Creative, a small but respected agency in Boston. The salary was modest, but it was a legitimate start in my field with growth potential. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope, of validation. My choice hadn't been a mistake after all. I decided to announce my good news at the upcoming monthly family dinner. Perhaps this achievement would finally earn me some respect from Rebecca, make my parents proud, help James remember the sibling bond we once shared. The evening of the dinner, I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a navy blue dress that projected professionalism and confidence. I practiced what I would say in the mirror, imagining their reactions. My parents would be relieved, James would be genuinely happy for me, and Rebecca. Well, at least she'd have to acknowledge I hadn't failed completely. "You've got this," I told my reflection, applying a final touch of lipstick. "This is your moment." Before leaving my room, I texted my best friend Haley, the one person who had consistently supported me through the difficult months of job searching and family tension. "Heading to family dinner, going to tell them about the job, wish me luck." Her response came quickly. "They'll be so proud, you worked hard for this. Call me after and tell me everything. You deserve this win, ally." With Haley's encouragement bolstering my confidence, I drove to my parents' house feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: optimism. The familiar knot of anxiety that usually tightened in my stomach as I approached their neighborhood seemed smaller tonight. I had good news. I was moving forward. Things were going to change. I arrived precisely on time, parking behind Rebecca's gleaming Audi SUV. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the bottle of champagne I'd splurged on, a small extravagance to celebrate my new beginning. As I walked up the front path, I allowed myself to imagine a future where family gatherings weren't sources of dread, where my achievements were acknowledged alongside Rebecca's, where I reclaimed my place in the family narrative. How wrong I was, how completely, devastatingly wrong. The dining room in my parents' house had always been reserved for special occasions and the monthly family dinners that my mother insisted upon. That evening, it looked the same as always: the cherry wood table gleaming under the chandelier, my mother's best china and crystal glasses arranged with precision, the centerpiece of fresh flowers perfectly proportioned. Everything in its place, just as my mother preferred life itself. My father was pouring wine when I entered, my mother arranging a platter of roasted vegetables. James and Rebecca were already seated, Rebecca showing something on her phone to my brother, who nodded with exaggerated interest. "Allison, right on time," my mother said, looking up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're just about ready to sit down." I placed the champagne on the sideboard. "I brought something special. I have news to share tonight." Rebecca glanced up, her perfectly shaped eyebrow rising slightly. "News? How intriguing." The initial conversation flowed as it always did, my father discussing market trends, my mother commenting on neighborhood happenings, James and Rebecca sharing anecdotes from their social circle. I waited, allowing the familiar rhythm to play out, my news burning in my chest like a small flame of hope. After the main course had been served and compliments paid to my mother's cooking, there was a natural lull in the conversation. I took a deep breath and seized the moment. "I wanted to tell everyone that I've accepted a position at Blue Leaf Creative," I said, unable to keep the smile from my face. "It's a junior design role, but the agency has a great reputation and works with some impressive clients. I start next Monday." For one brief, shining moment, there was what seemed like genuine pleasure around the table. My father nodded approvingly, my mother reached over to pat my hand, and James offered a "that's great, ally." Then Rebecca cleared her throat. "Blue Leaf Creative? Isn't that the tiny agency over on Cambridge Street?" she asked, her tone suggesting she was trying to place something vaguely familiar yet insignificant. "I think they did a campaign for one of our clients' competitors last year. Very simple work." I felt my smile falter but tried to maintain it. "They're boutique, not tiny. They focus on quality over quantity." Rebecca laughed lightly. "That's certainly one way to frame having a small client list. What's the starting salary for something like that? It must be challenging with student loans." "Rebecca," James said softly, but there was no real objection in his tone. "I'm just being practical," Rebecca continued, cutting into her chicken with surgical precision. "Creative jobs are passion projects for most people. That's why so many eventually transition to more stable careers. Isn't that right, Robert?" She turned to my father, pulling him into her dismissal of my achievement. My father hesitated, then offered a non-committal, "Every industry has its challenges." Emboldened by his non-defense, Rebecca continued. "Allison, I admire your persistence, really I do. 5 years out of college and still chasing the dream. Most people would have recognized the signs and moved on by now. There's something almost quaint about your determination." Each word landed like a small, precise cut. I looked to my mother, hoping for intervention, but she was suddenly very interested in rearranging the food on her plate. "I've worked hard for this opportunity," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "The creative director personally selected me from over 100 applicants." Rebecca's smile was a perfect blend of pity and condescension. "And that's wonderful, truly. But let's be realistic about what this means. You'll be, designing social media graphics and email newsletters. At your age, James was already managing a team and I was directing marketing strategy for national brand. We all have different paths, I managed. Of course we do, Rebecca agreed, her voice honey-sweet with poison at its center. Some paths just lead further than others. Some people have the talent and drive to reach impressive destinations, while others, she let the sentence hang, her implication clear. I looked to James, a silent plea for the brother who once promised to always have my back. He met my eyes briefly before looking away, his discomfort evident but his loyalty clearly elsewhere. I think what Rebecca means, he offered weakly, is that it's good to be realistic about career progression in creative fields. That's not what I said at all, Rebecca laughed, touching James' arm affectionately while keeping her eyes locked on me. I'm saying that maybe we need to acknowledge that Allison simply doesn't have what it takes to succeed at the level the rest of this family operates at. And that's okay. Not everyone can be exceptional. Most people are average, that's why it's called average. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped my water glass, feeling the cool condensation against my suddenly hot skin. Rebecca, perhaps we could discuss something else, my mother suggested mildly, the closest she would come to acknowledging the attack happening at her dinner table. But Rebecca was just warming up. I'm only saying what everyone thinks, Alina. Allison has been struggling since graduation. Living at home at 25, jumping from one failed interview to another, and now celebrating a junior position like it's some great achievement. At some point, kindness means honesty. She turned her attention fully back to me, her eyes gleaming with something that looked disturbingly like enjoyment. The truth is, Allison, you've always been the family disappointment. Your artistic talents that everyone had to pretend to admire at family gatherings. Your impractical degree. Your inability to support yourself like an adult. Even the way you dress, trying so hard to look professional tonight, but still somehow missing the mark. I felt tears burning behind my eyes but refused to let them fall. My throat constricted as I looked desperately toward my parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, to defend me, to love me unconditionally. My father studied his wine glass with intense focus. My mother smoothed her napkin repeatedly, her eyes never lifting to meet mine. Their silence was deafening. In that moment, I understood with crystal clarity that they would never stand up for me. Not against Rebecca, who embodied everything they valued. Not against James, their golden child. My pain was acceptable collateral damage in maintaining their precious family harmony. Excuse me, I finally managed, my voice barely audible as I pushed back from the table. My chair made a harsh scraping sound against the hardwood floor, an inappropriate noise in my mother's perfect dining room that would normally earn a disapproving look. But she still wouldn't meet my eye. I walked out, hoping that someone would follow. That someone would call my name, apologize, acknowledge what had just happened. The front door closed behind me with a quiet click, and I stood on the porch for a moment, giving them one last chance. Inside, I could hear the conversation resuming. My mother asking if anyone wanted coffee with dessert. My father commenting on the weather forecast for the weekend. Life continuing as though I had never been there at all. I don't remember the drive from my parents' house. Somehow I found myself parked in the lot of a 24-hour drugstore, my hands still gripping the steering wheel, tears finally flowing freely down my face. The fluorescent lights from the store cast an eerie glow across the dashboard, illuminating my knuckles, white from clutching the wheel so tightly. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone and called Haley. It was after 10 p.m., but she answered on the second ring. "Ali, how did it go?" The sound of her voice, warm, concern, genuinely caring, broke something in me. A sob escaped before I could form words. "Where are you?" Haley asked immediately, all traces of sleepiness gone from her voice. I heard rustling in the background, her getting out of bed, grabbing keys. "Walgreens parking lot on Cambridge Street," I managed between sobs. "Stay there, I'm coming, 15 minutes tops." True to her word, Haley's faded blue Honda pulled up beside me less than 15 minutes later. Without a word, she got out of her car, opened my passenger door, and slid in beside me. "What happened?" she asked simply. I told her everything, Rebecca's cruel words, James's betrayal, and worst of all, my parents' silence. Haley listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly incredulous and then angry on my behalf. When I finished, she reached across and took my keys from the ignition. You're coming home with me tonight. We'll get your car tomorrow. That night, curled up on Haley's couch with a borrowed set of pajamas and a mug of tea that had long gone cold, I felt something inside me shut down. A protective numbness spread through my body, insulating me from the raw wound of betrayal. The next morning, I couldn't get out of bed. The thought of facing the world, of pretending to be functional, was overwhelming. Haley called in sick to her own job to stay with me, bringing me toast I couldn't eat and water I sipped only to appease her worried expression. Your phone's been buzzing, she said around noon, nodding toward my purse where I'd abandoned it the night before. I checked it reluctantly. 3 missed calls from my mother, a text from James asking if I'd calmed down yet, and an email from Blue Leaf Creative confirming my start date the following Monday. Nothing acknowledging what had happened. Nothing resembling an apology. Days passed in a fog of emotional numbness. I returned to my parents' house only to pack essential belongings while they were at work, leaving a brief note saying I was staying with a friend. Haley insisted I move into her spare room until you figure things out. When Sunday night came, the eve of my first day at Blue Leaf, I found myself paralyzed by anxiety and lingering depression. How could I start a new job when I could barely function? How could I create anything when I felt so hollow inside? I can't do it, I told Haley as we sat at her small kitchen table. I should call and tell them I've changed my mind. Haley put down her fork with a clatter. Allison Matthews, I love you, but I will not let you sabotage yourself because your family sucks. Her bluntness startled me out of my fog momentarily. You earned that job, you're talented. You're going to get up tomorrow morning, put on that navy dress that makes you look like a creative badass, and you're going to show up. I'll drive you there myself if I have to. The next morning, Haley made good on her threat, practically dressing me herself and driving me to the brick-converted warehouse building that housed Blue Leaf Creative. She pulled up to the entrance and turned to face me. Text me at lunch to let me know how it's going. You've got this, ally. I walked into Blue Leaf on autopilot, barely registering the industrial chic decor or the friendly receptionist who directed me to the office of Diana Reynolds. Creative director Diana was nothing like I expected in her mid-40s with a shock of prematurely silver hair cut in an asymmetrical bob, wearing bright red glasses and a paint-splattered sweater that somehow looked intentional rather than messy. Allison, welcome to the chaotic little family that is Blue Leaf, she said, standing to shake my hand. I'm thrilled you're joining us. Family, the word made me flinch involuntarily. Diana's sharp eyes caught the reaction. Are you all right? Fine, I said quickly, just nervous first-day jitters. She studied me for a moment longer than was comfortable, then nodded slowly. Well, nervousness is normal. But know that we hired you because of your portfolio and your ideas, not because we expect perfection from day one. This is a place to grow. Those first weeks at Blue Leaf passed in a blur. I went through the motions, learning the company workflows, getting to know my colleagues, working on small projects for clients. My technical skills carried me through, but the creative spark that had once been my strength was dimmed by the emotional weight I carried. Meanwhile, my phone continued to accumulate messages from my family, all acting as if nothing had happened. My mother texted about the next family dinner, as if I'd simply missed one for a scheduling conflict. My father called once, leaving a voicemail about helping me look for an apartment now that I had steady income. James sent an occasional text that felt obligatory rather than genuinely concerned. Then came the message that broke through my numbness and reignited my anger. A text from James. Mom's upset you're skipping Sunday dinner again. Why are you causing all this drama? Rebecca even said she'd help you find a better apartment in our neighborhood. Can't you just let it go? Let it go, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. As if my pain were an inconvenience to everyone else's comfort. That evening, Diana stopped by my desk as I was staring blankly at a layout that wasn't coming together. Allison, do you have a minute? In her office, Diana didn't start with small talk. Your technical skills are excellent, but I can see you're struggling. Your concepts lack the passion I saw in your interview portfolio. I braced for a reprimand, possibly even dismissal. Instead, Diana surprised me. I don't know what's going on in your personal life, and you don't have to tell me. But Blue Leaf offers counseling services through our benefits package. Many creatives find it helpful, myself included. I couldn't hide my surprise. Diana smiled. 6 years of therapy and counting. Best investment I've ever made in my creative career and personal well-being. She slid a business card across her desk. Dr. Melissa Carter. She specializes in working with creative professionals. Think about it. I took the card, not committing but not refusing either. That night, I hit rock bottom. Alone in Haley's guest room, I scrolled through social media to find pictures from the Sunday dinner I'd missed. There was my family, smiling for the camera as if nothing were wrong, as if I didn't exist. Rebecca had her arm around my mother, my father and James raised wine glasses in a toast. The caption read, "Family time is the best time." I threw my phone across the room and finally allowed myself to really cry deep, body-shaking sobs that released weeks of suppressed emotion. I cried for the little girl who believed her family would always protect her. I cried for the young woman trying to build a career on shaky emotional ground. Mostly, I cried for the person I was now, someone who had been shown, in the clearest possible terms, that her feelings didn't matter to the people who were supposed to love her most. When the tears finally subsided, I retrieved my phone from where it had landed, thankfully unbroken. With shaking hands, I texted the number on Diana's card. "My name is Allison Matthews. I'd like to schedule an appointment. I don't see why I need therapy. I'm not the one with the problem." Dr. Melissa Carter's office was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the sterile, clinical space I'd imagined, it was warm and slightly eclectic, with mismatched but comfortable furniture and abstract art on the walls. Dr. Carter herself was a black woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that somehow put me at ease despite my resistance. "Therapy isn't about having a problem," she replied calmly. "It's about having a space to process experiences and emotions without judgment." It was our first session, and I'd spent the first 20 minutes recounting the dinner disaster in halting, emotionally detached terms, as if telling a story about someone else. "They should be the ones sitting here, not me," I insisted. Dr. Carter nodded. "Perhaps they should, but they're not here, and you are. That already tells me something important about you, Allison." "What's that?" I asked warily. "That despite everything, you're still trying. You're seeking understanding and healing. That takes tremendous courage." Something about her words cracked the protective shell I'd built around myself. In that moment, I didn't feel brave at all. I felt broken and abandoned. To my horror, tears began streaming down my face. "I don't understand," I managed between sobs. "Why didn't they say anything? Why did they just sit there and let her tear me apart?" It was the question that had haunted me since that night, the one I couldn't answer no matter how many times I replayed the scene in my mind. That first breakthrough session opened a floodgate. In the weeks that followed, I began to understand that my parents' silence at the dinner wasn't an isolated incident but part of a lifelong pattern. Dr. Carter helped me see how their avoidance of conflict had shaped our family dynamics, how their emotional neglect had taught me that my feelings were less important than maintaining a peaceful facade. "Your parents likely grew up in environments where emotions were considered disruptive or inappropriate," Dr. Carter explained during our fourth session. "They're repeating patterns they learn, just as you learn from them that expressing hurt or anger would not be met with support." "But I'm their daughter," I argued. "Shouldn't that override whatever patterns they learn?" "Ideally, yes, but breaking generational patterns requires awareness and intentional effort. Many people simply don't have the tools or understanding to do that work." Understanding the psychology behind my family's behavior didn't excuse it, but it helped make sense of it. It wasn't that I specifically wasn't worth defending, it was that emotional authenticity was so threatening to them that they couldn't access it even to protect their child. As November approached, bringing with it the holiday season, my mother's texts became more frequent and insistent. "We expect you for Thanksgiving dinner. Your grandmother is asking about you 4 p.m. sharp." No acknowledgement of the rift. No recognition of my feelings. Just the expectation that I would show up and play my part in the family performance. After discussing it with Dr. Carter, I made the difficult decision to decline. "Mom, I won't be attending Thanksgiving this year," I texted. "The last family gathering I attended, Rebecca said cruel and hurtful things to me while everyone sat in silence. No one has acknowledged or apologized for this. I need to protect my emotional well-being by not putting myself in that situation again." My phone rang almost immediately. It was my father, an unusual occurrence that signaled the seriousness with which they were taking my rebellion against family tradition. "Allison, this is ridiculous," he said when I answered, skipping any greeting. "Whatever happened, you need to get over it. Your mother has already ordered the turkey and planned the seating. You're upsetting her unnecessarily." His dismissal of my feelings so casually, so completely crystallized everything I'd been working through in therapy. "Dad, do you even know what Rebecca said to me that night?" A pause. "I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it. You know how direct she can be. She called me a failure and a disappointment to the family, and you and Mom just sat there," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "That hurt more than anything she said." Another pause, longer this time. "Your mother doesn't do well with conflict, Allison. You know that." "And what's your excuse?" I asked. "Now you're being disrespectful," he said, his voice hardening. "This family works because we all do our part to keep the peace. Your mother has put a lot of effort into planning this Thanksgiving." "I won't be there," I interrupted. "I've made other plans." I ended the call before he could respond, my heart pounding but a strange sense of calm settling over me. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had prioritized my own emotional needs over my family's expectations. My mother's attempt came next, a tearful voicemail about family tradition and how much it would hurt Grandmother Matthews not to have everyone present. In the past, this would have crumbled my resolve instantly. Now, I recognized it for what it was: emotional manipulation designed to maintain the status quo, regardless of the cost to me. I spent Thanksgiving with Haley and her family, a boisterous gathering where disagreements were voiced openly and resolved with genuine communication, where feelings were acknowledged rather than suppressed, where I was welcomed without expectation of performance. The contrast to my own family dynamics was both healing and heartbreaking. "Is your family always like this?" I asked Haley as we washed dishes after dinner. "Like what?" "So, real with each other. Your dad and brother had that whole debate about politics, and no one pretended it wasn't happening." Haley laughed. "Oh, that's nothing. You should have been here last Christmas when my mom told my aunt her fruitcake was an affront to desserts everywhere. It didn't speak for 2 days, then worked it out, and now it's a family joke." The idea of conflict being resolved rather than avoided, of honesty being valued over artificial harmony, it was revolutionary to me. By Christmas, I had made enough progress in therapy to establish clear boundaries with my family. I agreed to attend Christmas Eve dinner at my parents' house, but with conditions. I would drive myself so I could leave if necessary, and I informed them beforehand that I would not tolerate any belittling comments from Rebecca or anyone else. My mother was scandalized by my demands, but for the first time, I held firm. "These aren't demands, Mom, they're boundaries. I'm allowed to have them." The Christmas Eve gathering was strained but survivable. Rebecca was noticeably restrained, having apparently been warned to behave. My parents were overly cheerful, compensating for the underlying tension with excessive holiday spirit. James seemed uncomfortable, caught between his wife and his sister, still unwilling to take a definitive stand. But something fundamental had shifted, not in them, but in me. I no longer needed their validation or approval to know my worth. I no longer accepted the narrative that keeping the peace was more important than honoring my truth. I had begun the difficult, but essential process of separating my self-worth from their perceptions and expectations. As Dr. Carter put it in our session just before the new year, "You're learning that you can love your family without accepting their limitations as your own." That's a powerful distinction. 6 months of therapy transformed not just how I viewed my family relationships, but how I approached every aspect of my life. The patterns Dr. Carter helped me identify, the people-pleasing, the self-doubt, the tendency to minimize my own feelings, hadn't just affected my family dynamics. They had infiltrated my friendships, my romantic relationships, and yes, even my professional life. As I did the work of establishing healthier boundaries and reconnecting with my authentic self, something unexpected happened at Blue Leaf Creative. I began to thrive. The creative block that had plagued me in those early weeks dissolved as I reconnected with my passion for design. My concepts became bolder, more innovative, and clients were responding enthusiastically. Deanna noticed the change. One Wednesday afternoon, she called me into her office, where she was reviewing portfolio samples with Marcus, the agency's account director. "Allison, perfect timing. Marcus and I were just discussing the Horizon Tech account." Horizon was one of Blue Leaf's largest clients, a rapidly growing software company with a substantial marketing budget. Their projects were typically handled by senior designers with years of experience. "They're launching a new product line in Q3 and need a complete brand identity package," Diana continued. "After seeing your work on the Clearwater campaign, I'd like you to take the lead on this one. I blinked in surprise. Me, but I've only been here 6 months. Deanna smiled. And in that time, you've proven you have both the technical skills and the creative vision this project needs. The timeline is tight and the client is demanding, but I think you're ready for this challenge. The old Allison would have immediately doubted herself, would have deflected the opportunity out of fear of failure. The new Allison recognized her own growth and capabilities. Thank you for the opportunity, I said. I won't let you down. That evening, I attended a networking event for creative professionals in Boston, something the old Allison would have avoided, fearing judgment or rejection. The venue was a renovated warehouse space in the Seaport District, filled with designers, writers, photographers, and agency representatives mingling over craft cocktails and artisanal appetizers. I was discussing color psychology with a UX designer from a neighboring agency when a tall man with warm brown eyes and an easy smile joined our conversation. I couldn't help overhearing your take on blue in tech branding, he said. I've been making the exact same argument to my clients for years. They all want blue because trustworthiness, but then wonder why they blend in with every other tech company. His name was Nathan Parker, a brand strategist who had recently relocated from Chicago to Boston. Our conversation flowed effortlessly from design trends to favorite museums to the best coffee shops for working remotely. When the event wound down, we exchanged business cards the old-fashioned way, since neither of us had our phones out. I'd love to continue this conversation sometime, Nathan said. Maybe over coffee at one of those shops we debated about. For a moment, my old insecurities flickered. Was this professional networking or personal interest? Did it matter? The new Allison decided to be direct. I'd like that, I replied. And just to be clear, would this be a networking coffee or a date coffee? I'm open to either, but I prefer clarity. Nathan's smile widened. Definitely a date coffee, if you're interested. Though I'm always happy to network with talented designers too. His straightforward response was refreshing. No games, no hidden agendas. We arranged to meet that weekend at a small cafe in Cambridge that we both wanted to try. As I focused on rebuilding my life and identity separate from my family's expectations, I maintained limited but structured contact with my parents. Sunday dinners were no longer obligatory, but I would meet my mother for lunch occasionally or help my father with computer issues when needed. These interactions were measured, with clear time limits and on my terms. Rebecca I avoided entirely until fate intervened. 3 months after the Christmas Eve dinner, I was working on the Horizon Tech project at my favorite coffee shop when I looked up to see Rebecca entering, designer handbag swinging from her arm as she headed to the counter. My stomach tightened instinctively, but I took a deep breath, remembering Dr. Carter's words. Encounters with difficult people are opportunities to practice your boundaries, not tests you can fail. I considered packing up and leaving, but that felt like giving her power over me. Instead, I continued working, hoping she wouldn't notice me. No such luck. As she turned from the counter with her latte, her eyes swept the room and landed on me. A flash of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by her usual composed expression. After a moment's hesitation, she approached my table. Allison, what a surprise. I looked up, meeting her gaze directly. Rebecca. Working on something interesting, she asked, nodding toward my laptop. Actually, yes, I'm leading the brand identity project for Horizon Tech's new product. Rebecca's eyebrow raised slightly, her signature expression of calculated skepticism. Horizon? They're quite significant in the industry. Surprising they'd entrust something so important to someone at your level. 6 months ago, her comment would have planted seeds of doubt that would have grown into forests of insecurity. Today, I recognized it for what it was: a reflection of her issues, not mine. My creative director believes in my abilities, I replied calmly. As do I. The client seems quite pleased with the direction so far. Rebecca's smile tightened. Well, it's nice that your little agency gives junior designers such big opportunities. At larger firms like mine, we typically require years of experience before handling accounts of that caliber. Different approaches work for different environments, I said, still maintaining eye contact. The benefit of a boutique agency is that talent gets recognized and nurtured regardless of years on the job. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly, unused to me standing my ground. She opened her mouth to respond when a familiar voice interrupted. Ally, sorry I'm late, client call ran over. Nathan appeared beside our table, coffee in hand. He leaned down and kissed my cheek before noticing Rebecca. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting, I assured him, feeling a surge of confidence. Nathan, this is Rebecca, my brother's wife. Rebecca, this is Nathan Parker. Nathan extended his hand with his usual warmth. Nice to meet you. Rebecca shook his hand briefly, her eyes darting between us, recalculating. Likewise, I should be going meetings all afternoon. Give James my best. As she walked away, her posture slightly stiffer than when she'd entered, I felt no triumph or vindication, just a calm certainty that her opinion of me no longer determined my self-worth. That seemed tense, Nathan observed as he took the seat across from me. Family complications. You could say that, I replied. She's part of the reason I spent 6 months in therapy. Nathan's expression was one of understanding rather than judgment. My brother and I didn't speak for 2 years after our father died. Family can be complicated. His simple acknowledgement that families could be sources of pain as well as support, that relationships could be complex without anyone being wholly wrong or right, was profoundly validating. The encounter with Rebecca had an unexpected consequence. The following day, I received a text from James, the first direct communication we'd had in months that wasn't related to a family gathering. Rebecca mentioned she saw you yesterday. Can we meet for coffee sometime, just us? We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a diner halfway between his office and mine. The James who sat across from me looked tired, the confident posture I remembered somewhat diminished. You look good, ally, he said after we ordered. Happy? I am happy, I replied. Happier than I've been in a long time. James nodded, turning his coffee cup in circles on the table. Rebecca said you're leading some big project at work. I am. It's challenging but fulfilling. That's good. He paused, seemingly struggling with what to say next. Look, allied, about what happened at that dinner. Which part? I asked, not unkindly but not making it easy for him either. The part where Rebecca systematically tore me down, or the part where you and Mom and Dad sat there and let it happen? James winced. Both. I guess I should have said something. Yes, you should have. It's complicated with Rebecca. It's really not, James, I interrupted. When someone is cruel to your sister, you stand up for her. That's what family is supposed to do. He looked down at the table. You're right, I failed you that night, and not just that night, for years before that too. I've been conflict-avoidant, I guess. You've been a Matthews, I said with a small, sad smile. We were all taught that keeping the peace matters more than being honest or standing up for what's right. James looked up surprised. I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, that's exactly it. For the next hour, we had the most honest conversation we'd had since childhood. James admitted that his marriage was struggling, that Rebecca's perfectionism and need for control extended to their relationship in ways that left him feeling constantly inadequate. He shared that he'd recently begun seeing a therapist himself, prompted by increasing anxiety attacks. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when you needed me, he said as we prepared to leave. I'd like to try to be a better brother moving forward, if you'll let me. I felt the weight of our shared history, the closeness of our childhood, the distance of our adult years, the complex family dynamics that had shaped us both. I'd like that, I said, but I need you to understand that I've changed. I'm not going to pretend things are fine when they're not. I'm not going to silence myself to keep the peace. James nodded. I think I could learn something from that approach. Our relationship wouldn't be repaired overnight, but it was a beginning, one built on honesty rather than illusion. 1 year after the dinner that changed everything, my life had transformed in ways I could never have predicted. The junior designer struggling with self-doubt had become a confident senior designer with award-winning work in her portfolio. Blue Leaf had promoted me following the success of the Horizon Tech campaign, which had exceeded client expectations and attracted new business to the agent. I'd moved out of Haley's spare room into my own apartment, a bright, airy one-bedroom in Cambridge with large windows perfect for my growing collection of houseplants. The space reflected my emerging sense of self, colorful without being chaotic, personal without being cluttered, a place where I felt completely at home. My relationship with Nathan had deepened into something built on mutual respect and genuine understanding. Unlike previous relationships where I'd molded myself to meet someone else's expectations, with Nathan I felt free to be authentically myself, strengths, flaws, and all. He supported my career without feeling threatened by it, shared his own vulnerabilities without shame, and most importantly, respected my boundaries without question. My relationship with James had slowly improved through intentional effort on both our parts. He and Rebecca had entered couples counseling, which had revealed fundamental incompatibilities in their expectations and values. They were now separated, living apart while deciding whether their marriage could be salvaged. My parents were a more complicated story. After months of limited contact and several attempted conversations that ended in frustration, I decided to try once more to help them understand my perspective. I invited them to dinner at my apartment, neutral territory, where I felt secure and in control. "This is a lovely place, Allison," my mother said as I showed them around. Her eyes lingered on the gallery wall I'd created, featuring my own artwork alongside pieces from local artists I'd befriended. "You've always had a good eye for design." Coming from my mother, this qualified as effusive praise. I accepted it with a simple, "thank you," rather than diminishing it as I once would have. Dinner was pleasant if somewhat stilted conversation limited to safe topics like my father's golf game and my mother's garden club. As I served coffee and the apple crisp I'd made for dessert, a family recipe that felt like reclaiming a piece of my heritage rather than a concession, I decided it was time. "I wanted to talk about what happened last year," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "The dinner where Rebecca said those hurtful things and you both remained silent." My father immediately stiffened. My mother's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. "Allison, I thought we'd moved past that unpleasantness," my mother said, her tone suggesting this was a minor disagreement rather than a pivotal moment in our relationship. "I've moved forward," I corrected gently, "but we've never actually addressed what happened. I need you to understand how deeply your silence hurt me." "What would you have had us do?" my father asked, defensive edge to his voice. "Create a scene at the dinner table." "I would have had you defend your daughter," I replied simply. "I would have had you tell Rebecca that her behavior was unacceptable, that her words were cruel and untrue." "It's not that simple, Allison," my mother began. "Actually, it is that simple, Mom. When someone attacks your child, you stand up for them. That's what parents do." My directness clearly made them uncomfortable. They exchanged glances, a silent communication I'd witnessed throughout my childhood. "Your mother doesn't handle conflict well," my father said, falling back on the familiar excuse. "And what about you, Dad?" I asked. "What's your reason for sitting there while Rebecca tore me apart?" The question hung in the air between us. For perhaps the first time in my life, I saw my father struggle for words. I suppose I didn't want to upset your mother," he finally admitted. "Or James, things were tense enough already. So my feelings were less important than everyone else's comfort." Another uncomfortable silence. "We never meant to hurt you, Allison," my mother said tearfully. "We love you." "I know you love me," I acknowledge. "But love without action, without protection, without respect, that's not enough." My father's jaw tightened. "I think you're being unreasonable. Families have disagreements. People say things they shouldn't. You move past it." "This wasn't a disagreement, Dad. It was an attack, and your silence was a chose that told me exactly where I stood in this family's hierarchy of importance." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "We're not perfect parents, Allison. We did the best we could." "I'm not asking for perfection," I said. "I'm asking for acknowledgement. I'm asking you to understand that your silence hurt me more deeply than Rebecca's words ever could. She was just being Rebecca. You were supposed to be my parent." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, circular at times, painful throughout, but ultimately necessary. My father remained largely defensive, occasionally conceding small points but never fully accepting responsibility. My mother vacillated between tears and attempts to smooth things over with platitudes about family bonds. I didn't expect a dramatic transformation, and I didn't get one. What I did get was clarity about their limitations, about our relationship, about my own needs and boundaries going forward. "I want a relationship with you both," I told them as they prepared to leave. "But it needs to be one based on mutual respect, not just obligation. I won't pretend things are fine when they're not, and I won't sacrifice my well-being to maintain an illusion of family harmony." My mother hugged me tightly before leaving. My father awkwardly patted my shoulder, the most physical affection he'd shown in years. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was honest, and that felt like progress. The following weekend, I hosted a dinner party for what Haley had dubbed my chosen family. Haley herself, Nathan, Diana and her husband, and several other friends who had supported me throughout the past year. As we shared food, wine, and laughter around my dining table, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for much of my life. What I've learned through this journey is that silence in the face of mistreatment isn't neutrality, it's complicity. My parents' silence wasn't the absence of a choice. It was a choice itself, one that prioritized comfort over justice, appearances over authenticity, harmony over truth. I've learned that family is both biology and choice, that the people who share our DNA don't automatically deserve unlimited access to our lives, and that sometimes the family we build ourselves provides the support and understanding our blood relatives cannot. Most importantly, I've learned that my value isn't determined by others' perceptions or approval. The words that once had the power to devastate me, family disappointment, lacking what it takes, have lost their sting because I no longer believe them. I know my worth now, and it isn't contingent on anyone else's validation. The journey hasn't been easy, and it isn't over. There are still difficult family gatherings, uncomfortable conversations, moments when old patterns threaten to reassert themselves. But I face them now with confidence in my boundaries, clarity about my needs, and compassion for both myself and my imperfect family members. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with you, please know you're not alone. Family dynamics can be complicated, painful, and deeply confusing. Your feelings are valid, your boundaries are necessary, and your well-being matters. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you experienced the painful silence of those who should have defended you? How did you handle it? Did you find healing? Please like and subscribe if this story meant something to you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be defended, protected, and truly seen. Thank you for allowing me to share my journey with you. Remember that healing isn't linear, boundaries aren't selfish, and creating a life that honors your authentic self is always worth the effort, even when it's difficult, even when it hurts, even when it means letting go of what you thought family was supposed to be.